Good morning. I am on my way to FreeTown Farm. Today we are going to start growing in a greenhouse. So this video is all about setting up your first greenhouse. We're going to go over some table design, some basic ways to store your peat moss, vermiculite if you're making your own seed starting mix so you don't get mice in there. We're going to plant some herbs and just really talk about the basic setup. So let's head over to Home Depot. That's where I'm going to get my peat moss, vermiculite to make the seed starting mix. So you can buy your seed starting mix, but it's going to cost $6 for 12 quarts. That's a low-end price. That's pretty good. You can pay up to $12 depending on what you're buying. But by making it yourself, you're going to save a lot of money, and we'll go over the costs. So we are going to pick up the basic ingredients for a seed starting mix. So this is vermiculite, 2 cubic feet. It's $20.97. We'll take this back to the greenhouse. I'll show you the recipe, and now we're going to go get some peat moss. The next ingredient we need is peat moss. That's $10.97 for 3 cubic feet. Really inexpensive, and we'll talk again about the cost like I said. But this is the cheapest way to make it, and you can use that money for seeds and other things you need for your greenhouse. So for about $42, we got all of this. That is 7 bags of the seed starting mix, 12 quarts. 6 times 7 is 42, and you can just picture in your mind how much more we're going to make this way, and again save money. We are pulling around to the first greenhouse. We are trying to build a second one before the spring. We've raised $4,000 out of $15,000. This is the first greenhouse. If you'd like to donate, I'll put that information in the video description, and I want to thank everyone who's donated and helped us get to $4,000. It's made a difference. So let's go inside and we'll get started on really talking about setting up your greenhouse. We'll do some talk about table design, seed starting mix, we'll plant some herbs, and just kind of give a quick overview of things that may be helpful for you when you are setting up your greenhouse. So again, this is greenhouse number 1, and we're going to be growing plants over there, tomatoes, peppers. They're self-pollinating, so that won't be an issue, but we also want to figure out how to get cucumbers, squash and zucchini in there, so we're going to have to worry about the pollinators. But essentially consider this half the greenhouse. You can set up a nice table just by building it yourself, just like this. Make sure you make it a width where your arms can reach, whatever size you want to make. This is just fencing. This is great because you want the water and soil and stuff to just fall to the ground. I do recommend putting stone down if you can. If you have a smaller greenhouse, the larger stone actually will hold a little bit of heat for those colder months and it'll radiate back. But you want this whole area to be something where water can fall to the ground, it'll wash away, it won't get muddy. So you can see that we built a couple of tables. The other thing that's really important is you want to make sure you get a level off your tables. Now out in a greenhouse, it doesn't matter as much. You can water from the top, water can fall on the ground than if you're doing this indoors. But I'm going to bottom water my seed starts, maybe get bigger trays, and then you could just fill the whole tray up, and your seed starts can be watered from the bottom. That's just a little bit better in my opinion, because greenhouses can get humid, diseases can come in. I don't want to wet the tops of the smaller plants, the seedlings as they're growing, and I think that's a good way to go. Now if this got into a bigger production than just this space, then I would probably go with overhead watering, because it would be quicker. If I have a whole table set up here, I can just take a watering can and go across. Seedlings are going to get bottom watered. When I pot them up into something larger, they're going to go into trays that drain, and we're going to water from the top. But this is where we are at day 1. We're thinking of putting a table right down here, about 3 feet wide, and we're going to double stack it. There'll be plenty of light. If you put your peat moss bags, your vermiculite bags, all kinds of stuff on the ground, mice will get in there and nest. And it's really freaky to put your hand into a bale of peat moss and find a nest of mice. You don't want to do that. So this is our potting up mix. This has perlite in it. This is a little bit different than a seed starting mix. Put it in a trash can, keep it dry. That's what you want. We're going to put our peat moss right into there. Keep it dry, basic ingredient. The vermiculite's going to go into the trash can. We'll blend it together. We'll blend it right in there, and we'll have our seed starting mix. So let me set that up, show you how to do that, and then we'll get to planting the herbs. So we're going to make the seed starting mix in ratios. It's going to be 5 parts peat moss or 6 parts peat moss to 1 part vermiculite. What's a part? It's just equal containers. So if we're going to use this container, we would do 5 parts, 5 containerfuls of the peat moss, 1 container full of vermiculite. That's a 5-to-1 ratio. If you're making more, you could use a bigger container. Just use the same size container for both parts. 5 or 6 parts peat, 1 part vermiculite. So that's going to set up the basic seed starting mix. Now, seed starting mix when you're doesn't need fertilizer to start. If you're doing it indoors or on a really small scale, you'll pot up, you'll move on, or you can feed them a water-soluble fertilizer while they're growing. The plants actually live off the seed coat. But because we're in a greenhouse, and they'll be growing a little bit longer, I think, in the seed trays, we could put in a handful of granular fertilizer. I'm going to soak this in with fish emulsion. You just don't want a lot. Whatever you're using, just put a little bit of the fertilizer in there. That'll be enough to get the seedlings going. When we get to the potting up mix, that's going to have, in our case, we're going to put worm castings in there. We're going to use fish emulsion. Maybe we'll add something else. But you don't have to over worry about feeding the initial seed starts in the first couple of weeks if you don't want to. This is 5-gallon buckets of the peat moss. Now, of course, it's not as fine as the other stuff that you pay more, so you'll have to kind of throw these out now and again when you are filling up your seed trays, but it's not that big a deal for all the money you're saving. 5 parts peat, 1 part vermiculite. This is going to get mixed through. You need to pre-moisten this before you start packing the cells. And seriously, I would just put in 2 handfuls of a granular fertilizer here. It doesn't matter which one, as long as N, P, and K is represented. Mix it all through, maybe water in some fish emulsion. That will set all this up for the seed starts. So I did find Garden Tone. It's a 3-4-4 fertilizer. 2 handfuls right in there. Don't overstress. And then for the fish emulsion, I'm going to do 1 tablespoon in 5 gallons of water. That's the water coming on. And we want this to be damp all the way through. Let me get the fish emulsion in there, and then we'll get to planting. This is the completed seed starting mix. Nice and dark, totally saturated, and it looks pretty good. Again, you're going to have to take out some of the bigger pieces of peat, but for $42, this is much more than you would get if you bought the 4-quart bags, if you bought 7 of them. And we still have all that peat moss left. Setting up the seed trays is pretty straightforward. Seed starting mix is all pre-moistened. You're going to fill it just like that, and then you're going to pull out a cell, pack it down with your thumb. You want a nice dense base for your seed starts. Fill it up again, take off the excess, put it into a tray. Now, if you have a smaller garden and you are maybe doing 100, 200 plants, you may want to just start your seeds in these containers right here, and then you don't have to pot up. If you're doing thousands of plants, maybe you want to start them in the cells like this. It's 144. And the reason you do this is you want to concentrate all the seedlings in a smaller space. It's easier to manage them, and then you pot them up. We're going somewhere in the middle. We're doing these 72 cells, 72 spaces in here. Now, when you're watering, the most vulnerable time is really when your seeds are germinating. They could get fungus. Watering from above can splash the seeds out. Different sized greenhouses will have different humidities. The bigger ones tend to have air circulation, so mold, damping off disease is less of an issue. In your smaller greenhouses, it might be, so you wouldn't want to water on the top. So these are in flats that can have water. We can fill this up, water from the bottom. When the plants are 1 inch or 2 tall, it really doesn't matter if you water from the top if you have good air circulation. You just don't want them staying wet for long periods. As they move from these cells and we pot them up into something like this, they'll be in baskets that don't have bottoms. We'll water from the top. The plants will be fine. But the decision on how you want to grow your seedlings is really based on how many plants you want to have, how much space you have in your greenhouse. We are inside my house, so I can give you a couple examples of how things are growing and get you some close-ups. But the main herbs that we're planting today are cool weather perennial herbs. It's oregano, thyme, and chives, and we're going to do the overseeding method. I'll explain that as we go along. So thyme and oregano, we plant the same way. They are really tiny seeds, and if you just plant 1 seed, you have to wait a long time for that plant to get large. We're going to be selling these. We're going to be putting them out in the garden. We're going to be cutting them. You can overseed them, and these seedlings are about a week old, so the oregano is starting to germinate. And you can see lots of little plants coming up. You don't need to put one seed of oregano, thyme, or chive in your seed cells. Overseed them. What does that mean? So again, there's the oregano seeds. See if I can do this. Let's clear that space out. We're going to take a pinch, and then that pinch is about that many seeds are going to go right into a fresh cell, into one space. And you get used to it. You can't really overseed that. I mean, you're not going to be able to see them fall. I know my hand's in the way. But once you put down that 25 seeds of thyme and oregano, you just gently scrape them in, and then you press it down. And that's all you do, and that's how I'm seed starting everything that you see in the video today. So that's how we're taking care of the thyme and the oregano. They're really small seeds. Overseed them in about 2 or 3 weeks. This is oregano. They're going to look like this. You can actually divide the root ball up, and then you have 2 plants. And then if they continue to grow, fill out, divide them again. So you can take an overseeded cell of oregano, thyme, divide it in half, you have 2 plants, let them grow, divide it in half again, you have 4 plants. So it's really a great way to multiply the number of herbs you have. Chives are the other plant, or the other herb that's going in today. Those are bigger seeds. They look like this. And we're going to take a pinch of them. Let me put them over here. And that's a little bit too many. Somewhere between, I don't know, 10, 15 or something like that are going to go into a single cell here. Just drop them on. You could do more if you want. Chives are pretty much indestructible. Same with the oregano and thyme. Once the root systems are established, press them in. When they get big enough, we're going to tear them right down the middle. We'll have 2 plugs of the chives. So these are going in today. They can take the cold weather. They're going to germinate in the warmth of the greenhouse. They're going to tolerate the nights, even if there's a little bit of frost that comes in. So they're good to go. Thanks so much for watching. So we have our perennial frost cool weather crops set up. What does that mean? So this greenhouse is not dropping below 32 degrees right now, middle of January, because the days are staying warmer, so it heats up. It does pretty well. Eventually we're going to have cold, below freezing days, freezing nights, so frost may come in here. But the perennial herbs can take a frost, the perennial flowers can take a light frost, so everything will be fine in here. So right now, cool weather, frost tolerant crops are being started in the greenhouse. Please subscribe. We'll be going through the entire season, show you everything that we're growing in here and getting out into the farm and the fields. Thanks for watching.